listening to Raw Knowledge Podcast. Myself, Alex Connor. Today, I'm joined by Pete Hartwig. Pete, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, it's awesome to be here.
Yeah.
This is actually, I think this is my first official podcast, like in person as well. So.
Man, that is awesome. Well, I'm glad. It's a pleasure to be the first on an official face-to-face podcast.
Yeah, it's exciting.
It's cool. We were talking beforehand how it's different to, when you're online, it's a different kind of premise. You're behind a screen. There's almost like a little bit of time delay. But when you're in person, it's just so much more realistic, and where possible, it's not always possible. It's good to get face to face and have a chat.
Yeah, and then I think like we were saying as well, like body language is such a powerful communicator and everything like that. So it's awesome. I'm excited.
Yeah, I think it's going to be good. I think a lot of people will be excited too, because I know a lot of people in my sphere, in the fitness industry as well, that really look up to you as well, as someone like, a figure, a physique athlete, and someone who's doing great things in the space. And I know that's how I kind of came to learn about you through my friends too. I guess we'll start as we always do at the beginning. A lot of people will know your name, what you're about, but perhaps just introduce yourself for those who don't, or even if someone said, hey, Pete, like, what do you do? How would you describe that?
Yeah, awesome. So I'm Pete Hartwig and classic physique athlete. So I started competing back in like 2006. So I've been competing like nearly 16 years now. I've been coaching, like doing contest prep coaching, posing, that sort of stuff. I've always been really fascinated with like the artistic side of bodybuilding, and really big fan of like the golden era and everything. And so, I incorporate a lot of that into like my style that I like to present on stage, and really try and bring back like artistry into bodybuilding as well.
And you do it well. And I think now as well, the classic era, it seems to be coming back now, with a lot of federations adding that category in. There's a few key figures in the space who I think people idolize. It's good to be, authentic and unique, but it seems to be a little bit more of a trend that's coming back. I feel like it was lost for a little bit, and now that sort of the keyword, the aesthetic or that golden era, is making a return. I'd love to start at the beginning. When you were starting your fitness journey, did you have anyone in your life that inspired you to get into fitness? Was it an event? What sort of led you into this, like, I guess, physique lifestyle, if you will?
Yeah, my fitness journey sort of started, I would say probably coming from a place of insecurity more than anything. Like, just when I was a kid, I was really small, and I don't know, I was maybe a little bit weird, a little bit socially awkward, and I also have like quite an obsessive temperament as well. So I just sort of throw myself into things and just do like ridiculous amounts of hours on them. And so like fitness, bodybuilding, all that sort of stuff was one of those things. And I think it probably started when I was about like 10, and I just wanted to be like super ripped and super shredded and just, I don't know, jacked. I think like inspirations were just like, you watch like action heroes on like TV and stuff like that, and you kind of think, I want to be that kind of thing. But also feeling like, I guess when you're at that age sort of thing, you want to feel important, you want to feel noticed and stuff like that. And if you're not getting that from anywhere, then it's just like, I don't know, you just reach for things. And that's where I went with it. And I started with like, I don't know, just being really weird. I was like running laps around my yard and like doing push-ups, and then trying to do as many pull-ups as I could. And like I even like roped a box of encyclopedias together, and I was like lifting that. I don't know, but then I slowly developed into like, I started doing weights when I was probably about 14. I think it was just like we had PE class and stuff like that, and the teacher taught us how to do like, basic squats and rows and stuff like that. And then got really into it after that, and then just kind of kept progressing. And at that stage, I probably still didn't know what I was doing. I was just kind of like, yep, this is what I was taught kind of thing. And then I went straight to uni after I graduated high school, and I studied exercise science, exercise physiology. And then instead of sort of going down sort of the rehab route and that sort of thing, I was really interested in strength and conditioning, nutrition and stuff like that, as well as psychology. So like sort of the subjects I selected and sort of the things I was studying and interested in sort of went more down that sort of way. And then it sort of, I just really, got into the physical development and just haven't really stopped. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I can very, very much relate to that. And, you know, being a smaller person as well, a bit more European. And like you said, you sort of, you see these people or these heroes on TV. And I know I did, and I know that's, you've done a lot of photo shoots where you kind of express that with the superhero stuff. It's amazing. Batman, I used to look at that when I was a kid. I used to look at, like, I think it was Arnold Schwarzenegger, who was playing, not, what's his face now? He's playing the Greek god and whatnot. And you watch those shows and you look at these physiques and like, holy shit, like imagine if I look like that. And I think a lot of people, a lot of kids especially, that get into physique sports, there is that. I remember reading the Frank Zane book my dad gave me. It's called Fabulously Fit Forever. And my dad looked up to Frank Zane, so I kind of saw that and was like, oh yeah, that's an awesome physique. And obviously he's quite a reputable figure. But he talks about how it's like building your armor, but it tells a story. Because a lot of people that get into building a physique, it doesn't always come from a positive place. It comes from a place where like there was almost a need that wasn't met, or it was like, oh, we wanted to kind of fill a void. But then at some point, for some people, it becomes more than that. And that's a great transition to make. So like, okay, like you feel like you're enough. I feel like I've got what I want and I've addressed that. But now it's a passion that I want to share, or I just want to see how far I can take that. And like you said, going to uni and doing it at PE and having that interest of like how you can change the body and the mind. That's something that's always wildly fascinated me. Like with people ask me, oh, what do you do? You know, and I say like, oh, I help people look and feel better naked. Like, oh, you're a plastic surgeon. And I'm like, well, I don't use scalpels, you know what I mean? And I think people underestimate what you can do without those tools, you know, and I know that's something that you've been doing for people as well. So when did you start, I guess, helping people? Were people approaching you as you were like building your physique, you know, and obviously you were studying, you were getting this knowledge. You said you didn't want to go down the rehab route. What started to sort of come into your mind and where you wanted to take that?
Yeah. I started helping people, I would say, about third year of uni.
Mm-hmm.
We did our like Cert 3, Cert 4 in fitness personal training, and in one of the classes we did, we had to actually coach someone for like, I think it was 8 weeks, and sort of do that. And I'm like, oh, I don't mind this. Like I had like terrible social skills, and I was just like pretty introverted and everything. And like my previous jobs before that, I did like laboring and farming and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of just like, oh, I don't know if I sort of cut out for this kind of thing. But I was really good on sort of the, you know, like strategic planning of like fitness and nutrition strategies. This is like, oh, I'm awesome at this. But it's just like, oh, I have to go up and like talk to people and like get clients and all that sort of stuff, the marketing side of things, like leadership skills, all that sort of stuff. But I think like getting into that sort of stuff was really good because it forced me to sort of learn that sort of stuff. And I was like, well, actually, you know, maybe I wouldn't be too bad at this. And so I ended up, getting a job as a personal trainer and started doing it. I never thought that would be like kind of my thing. I was still sort of like, still figuring stuff out. I still am now. I'm quite a creative person. I have a lot of different interests. Mm-hmm. And so I was always been interested in like, you know, fitness and all that sort of stuff. And I think finding that, oh, I can, you know, transfer this knowledge and sort of help people. It's a very rewarding feeling to do that. And I sort of continued on that path, but I've always had some other sort of creative like thing going on as well. So they're sort of the two things that sort of have been
intertwined.
Yeah, and even through like the type of like routines and stuff that I do on stage. I don't know. It's just like a subconscious part of me that just finds its way into my life, like all the time. Yeah.
Does that come from anyone, like in your family, like your mum, your dad? I don't know if you've got brothers or sisters that like are quite creative.
No, I don't really. Definitely not for my dad. He's not really sort of creative, artistic, that sort of thing. Potentially my mum. I think she's sort of like probably a little bit more that way inclined, I think. But yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe something just in there. Like again, we're all different. Maybe someone down the track, but whatever it is, like you said, it's subconscious. Sometimes we don't know where we draw this creativity or passion from. It just comes to us. And I think it's great to be able to like collaborate those two things. Was there anyone, you mentioned before that when you were a kid, you were watching TV and watching people. Is there any idols that you've had in the golden era of bodybuilding or otherwise that inspired you or you looked up to, or you've your own been like, you want to be unique, your own source of inspiration?
Yeah, I would say it's sort of like a combination, but definitely like Arnold and Franco, definitely like in pumping iron and just sort of seeing that. And I think particularly Franco, because he's like similar height to me kind of thing, and seeing like, it's kind of just like, I don't know, like Batman and Robin sort of thing.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of just like, it's like a cool, like, and also being around to see that era sort of transition from sort of like the late 90s through to sort of how bodybuilding's really changed since then, and sort of seeing it start to change and being like, hang on a second, I don't like this. It's just like being, I think my ideal sort of physique and presentation is much more similar to what they were doing back in the golden era. And I think that's definitely a source of my inspiration. But then sort of researching more into it, and then guys like Frank Zane, Danny Padilla, and Robbie Robinson, and just like so many of these athletes that just like, I don't know, you just sort of just pick anyone from the lineup back in that era, and they just like have these like sculpted like physiques sort of similar to statues kind of thing. I think it's just very different to how it sort of evolved. And it's interesting because I think there's a lot of people who prefer the modern style physiques as well. But yeah, each to their own, I guess. Yeah.
It is a bit like that. And I think, something as well to point out is genetics. I think a lot of people underestimate the predisposition of genetics. I speak to a lot of young guys on the gym floor, and I have a lot of empathy because I'm like, I was there, I was young, I was training with my dad when I was young, and I wanted to build this great physique. And I was like, wow, I had this vision in my mind's eye that was so strong. And I was like, man, if I could go back and tell myself actually what it would take to get there, it would be vastly underwhelming in terms of like what I would do, but it'd be vastly overwhelming in terms of the actual discipline that it would take and the consistency of these basic things. And I speak to these young guys and I say, what's your goal? And, I'm being friendly. I know, because a lot of people didn't really give me the time of day when I was training, but there was a few people that did. And I always remember those people. So where I can, I say hello to people. I offer advice if they want it. I say to these young guys, like, what are you training for? And a lot of them, they're always, it's aesthetics. And I say, oh, cool. What's your inspiration? And they'll always say a name, but then they quickly proceed it with, because like, that's what I want to look at. And I've got the same genetics. And I was like, okay. And it's like, maybe you do, maybe you don't. And I don't really go down that path. Like, I'm not there to tell them what is and what isn't unless they become a client and set expectations. But it's interesting to see now the young people just go, I'll pick someone that I think is a similar height to me and has similar genetics. And if I train like him or like his ebook, I'll look like him. And it's like, doesn't always work like that, which is a bit of a shame. So I wanted to know, and I think a lot of people will be interested, is with your training, because you've got a phenomenal physique, aesthetically balanced. You've recreated that. You've been able to do that. Did you have, with your training, did you train yourself? Did you respond very quickly to training? Did you hit a lot of roadblocks early on? And did you have any help from coaches to help you develop the physique that you have now?
Yes. Just trying to think, putting all that together.
Yeah, yeah. I'll give you a bit of a mixed question there.
So yeah, I have done most of my like sort of strength and conditioning coaching planning I've done myself, but I think like a lot of it has just been like a mixed bag coming from lots of different people as well. So like studying at uni, doing like courses in exercise physiology, but also like I did a course at uni called Conditioning the Elite Athlete, and we had a lecturer there who I think he used to be the head strength and conditioning coach for the NRL team, the South Sydney Rabbitohs, and he got a whole list of like guest lecturers from like Australian rugby, from like rowing, AFL, cricket, all these other sports and stuff like that. And just like the amount of information and insight from that course was just, I don't know, it was worth like, it was probably one of the best courses I've ever done. It was amazing. And so there's a lot of stuff that I think, you know, just taking information from those other sports and just because I guess at the end of the day, it's all strength and conditioning principles. Like what are you trying to achieve? And what are the physiological principles that would, you know, pertain to that goal? And then how do you strategize that, put it into like a plan and then execute the plan? But then also just, you know, with, you know, guys online like Lane Norton, Mike Israetel, Jeff Nippert, and other people, like just taking information from that. And then also sort of my own trial and error and everything I was learning at uni as well. So I guess it's just like and then sort of building my own system out of all these places rather than just sort of dogmatically following one system or another, which I think is good when you're starting out because it's just like you don't have the understanding to be able to piece together your own systems. It's kind of just like, yeah, I'll just follow this, see how it goes, I'll follow that. But then after several years of following all these different things, you're like, well, actually, now I'm starting to see how this machine works. I can maybe put this bit with this bit and see how that, and you start to build out this plan and that plan, and then you start doing that, and then you sort of start creating your own systems and sort of seeing how that's put together as well. And then in terms of like how quickly I responded to it, I don't know, I think probably quite well. I feel like I'm a pretty good responder, like I would say, but in both directions. So it's just like when I get on a diet and I start training and everything, I respond quite rapidly. So I feel like that's an advantage. But then it's just like I respond quite rapidly in the other direction. So it's like I'll have a 2-week vacation, have a few beers, some pizzas and stuff. It's like, wow, I actually gained body fat really, really quickly as well. So it's so
Double-edged sword.
Yeah, so it's kind of like I guess it's pretty easy to tell what kind of lifestyle I'm living from that. But yeah, I guess I'm quite fortunate in that I do respond quite quickly, and I think a lot of the aesthetics also comes down to like genetics as well. Not necessarily in terms of how quickly I build muscle. I don't think I necessarily build muscle that much quicker than most people that I coach. It just looks differently on different people. And I think this is something that people don't realize, is that your skeletal structure and just your anatomical structure makes a huge difference. So you can take two athletes, the same level of conditioning, you know, both the same weight, same height even, and they can look very, very different depending on like how wide are their clavicles, how long is their long biceps head relative to the size of the tendon even, and stuff like that, because it's going to create a different shape and you have different sort of roundness and stuff like that. So you can have these sort of full rounder looking muscle bellies that sort of insert in proportions that just sort of create that shape. And that's something that you can't really change, but I mean, there are factors that you definitely can change. So it's like, all right, I want my back to look a little wider. It's just like I can't change the width of my skeleton, but I can just build more lats kind of thing. And, you know, favor your programming in to kind of serve that particular goal and that sort of thing. And so I've done that with a bit of my training as well. So I feel like my deltoids have always been sort of a strong point, and then doing, you know, a bit of calisthenics and gymnastics and stuff like that as well. It's sort of like I've done very little like heavy shoulder work, like shoulder pressing and stuff like that, because it's just like, you know, training handstands and doing all these other exercises, just like my delts are just getting hammered like so much. As I didn't even like, probably haven't even trained shoulders properly like consistently for like, I don't know, maybe 5 or 10 years. Like just sort of like, yeah, built them up doing a lot of heavy shoulder pressing and then getting into the gymnastic stuff. And then it's just like, okay, they're just there. Now I can sort of focus on like other proportions as well, and just sort of, you know, whereas I don't know, I think that would be maybe different to someone with a different anatomical structure as well.
Yeah, well, that's a good point, and it's true though, isn't it? And I think, like you said, you made some, you know, salient points where you talked about like building the system, and then you start with something and you learn what your body responds to. And it's a conversation I have a lot with clients where people come to me and go, I want to do this, and I'm like, there's kind of the rule that breaks the law in terms of, you know, we go, well, we can build muscle, but we can't necessarily change the shape. But therefore, by increasing the size and manipulating body fat, we create the illusion that we change the shape, because people go, oh, but you look different. I'm like, yeah, but all I've done is build muscle mass and decrease my body fat. Like, I've not literally changed my insertions or the anatomical stuff. I can't. And I think that's a confusing notion for a lot of people. And sometimes just simplifying it and be able to separate it, it kind of sets you free. I've been working with a coach, Dr. Joe Klamzeski, and, you know, he's a great guy in the industry. He's one of like the godfathers. And something I've learned from him is like the art of simplicity and how we can very easily overcomplicate things. That the actual mechanistic side of things is a complex thing, but what we can do can be quite simple to, you know, manipulate it, or what we need to do to achieve it, because we can't actually do all these things. I think like a good example is if I've got a plant, depending on the plant, I water it and I put it in the sun. That's pretty simple. But the process that plant goes through in germination is wildly complex. Like, if people knew like how the body actually builds muscle and all this, it's really intricate. But we don't necessarily need to understand that to every nth degree, and people get caught up in that.
Yeah.
He made this point where he goes to me, look, he goes, you have any strong body parts? You know, and I've showed him the images, and I'm like, you know, there's the odd one, but I fairly don't have anything that's just like super out the window. But he goes, also, you know, being a natural athlete as well, he's like, there's not really much you can do apart from just get bigger. So he's like, apart from, if there's something that responds really well, i.e. like your shoulders, he's like, maybe don't go OTT, but that could also be a feature point. Could be like one of your strong suits. So he's like, maybe you do build it, because how out of proportion are you going to get naturally, unless genetically you're really unfavored?
Yeah.
It's like, just get big, you know, which is, I know, a vast oversimplification, but it's something that I've been really pondering on with like just the athletes that I train. And people go, you know, they spend so much time trying to architect a workout around a muscle group. And I'm like, yeah, but you might actually be robbing yourself of overall lean tissue. I don't know if you want to speak on that, but interesting concepts.
Yeah. No, I really agree with that. I think a lot of times people can overcomplicate things. I think particularly in the scientific community, where it's just like you can get into all these nitty gritty details, and, you know, is there research to support this, and how many sets should we do for this, and all this sort of stuff. And I think that stuff's quite important, and I think it is good to keep asking those questions. But at some point, you just have to go and do the work, sort of thing, and just be like, I love that plant analogy. It's just like, well, you know, water it, put it in the sun. It's just like, well, you just got to eat right and then go do your training and stuff like that. If you spend all your time planning and trying to figure out all these mechanistic things, and if that results in sort of less action taken, then it's just like someone who's maybe not doing things as well, but they're just actually doing it kind of thing more consistently. Can surpass someone doing that, I think.
I mean, it's just through all the conversations as well I've had, you know, and you think, speaking to some of the best physiques that I've idolized, it's overwhelming. I'm like, oh, you know what? I've been overthinking this the whole time. usually has been one of my takeaways. Like, okay, you know what? Maybe I'm looking for something that doesn't exist. And I think that's, a role of a good coach is to simplify things. It's not to hide things from a client, but it's to go, hey, like, sure, if you want to know anatomy and physiology, you can read a book on it. But if you understand these basic concepts, you will get to the goal. But if you're really interested in it, do this. But I think, like you said, a lot of people procrastinate, they prepare, they spend so much time in the weeds, and it's like 20% of the knowledge, 80% of the job. And you could still be actually doing these things and growing, especially, again, the younger athlete. They're trying to create this perfect plan. I'm like, well, the best plan is the one you can stick to, progress with. And it might be the one that looks pretty simple on paper, but when you go so far as to overcomplicate it, you can kind of just end up getting nowhere. And I know myself, hold my hands up, I've wasted a lot of years where I could have just done some really basic stuff and been a lot further ahead and got those results and then gone, okay, now maybe I can be a little bit more nuanced with it. So I guess a good question, I'm interested to know what your training looked like when you started versus now. And again, a disclaimer, because I know some people look at this like, well, that's what I'm going to do. It's like, okay, there's no magic in this program that you'll tell us, but I am interested to know as well what you've done and what you do now, to build a more advanced physique.
Yeah, I've tried a lot of different training methodologies. So I started with like really basic full body workouts, just because when I was like 14 and I learned how to do different exercises in the gym, we didn't go into depth with like different split training programming and stuff like that. And it's going back probably how old I am, but like when I was like in high school, there wasn't, I think social media was quite new. It was sort of, I think it was just like maybe MySpace or something was coming up, but you couldn't just jump onto like YouTube and figure out all this stuff that you can now. And so it's kind of just like, all right, my teacher taught me this is what I'm going to do kind of thing. And that's what you do. And so I was just like full body workouts. And I was doing that probably at least 5 or 6 days a week. And, that's, reasonably impractical, but it's just like, I don't know, it was still better than nothing. And it's sort of just like, oh, I'm getting good at these fundamental like movements and all that sort of stuff. But then throughout the years, my training, I've tried so many different things, some of it sort of out of curiosity. So there's like, honestly, I don't think this is going to work as the most optimal strategy, but it's just like, I want to explore it as well. So I did a lot of like hypertrophy training where I would do, I think my initial splits was sort of like push pull legs. I tried like the bro split, like really splitting it up into like just one body, arms, shoulders, chest, all that sort of stuff.
I got a lot out of that as well. Although, what I mean, like people, like even now that is not the most intelligent thing, but like you said, it works when you're beginning because you're doing something.
Yeah. And sometimes even just like to change it up. So it's just like, I've been doing the push pull legs for say 6 months. And then it's just like that change in frequency and volume to just absolutely going to town on one body part and doing it once a week. Sometimes you can just get those gains because your body's having to adapt to something new as well. And you do that for a while. And I still think it has a place. Like I still might even use a bro split in the back end of a comp prep where I kind of want to maybe reduce the frequency and volume back to something that resembles maintenance as opposed to actually trying to make gains. And it's just like, well, I might only need to hit each body part once a week anyway, because I'm not really trying to gain any more tissue. I'm just trying to maintain what's already there and sort of relieve a bit of stress off my nervous system while I focus on the fat loss phase kind of thing. So I still use them from time to time. So I'm not one of those people who sort of just bags on the bro split, although I think it is one of the more sort of impractical strategies.
Absolutely.
But I even did, I did a lot of post-exhaustion training. So like supersets, drop sets, partials. And even though I don't think there's that much research on how effective these strategies are because it's hard to measure. And science is all about sort of like empirical measurements. Like, yeah, if we measure this variable, what changes in the outcome kind of thing. And it's just like, I don't know how much is your mate like lifting the bar on those force reps, and it's like, are we going to superset? Are we going to drop it, 20% and then do 6 reps or this or that kind of thing? And there's sort of like, negative reps supersetting. I think it's just like much, much harder to measure versus just like weight by reps by sets. There's your total volume. And we have these very easy to put into boxes and an outcome kind of thing. But I think I did get a lot of benefit and a lot of gains from doing those sort of post-exhaustion style workouts, and sort of just finding that they're kind of fun and enjoyable as well. But then I sort of shifted to, I think the programming that I think has worked the most effective for me has been like a power building style plan that starts with sort of like a heavier sort of compound a couple days a week. So I'm still trying to build up that sort of fundamental kind of strength base. And then the rest of the workout sort of moves into sort of my more so sort of hypertrophy rep ranges. So it might be like the first couple of exercises, like 4 to 8 reps kind of max, and then sort of moving into sort of maybe 8, 15, that sort of thing. And then sort of progression in volume, sort of undulating the volume and intensity sort of week to week. So you're not sort of just crashing your nervous system. And then sort of, so there's strategic progressions in that. And then before I sort of go to it like a deload, I'll usually throw in a week that it does incorporate those post-exhaustion things, because it's kind of just like,
even if there's a 1 or 2%, like better to have had a go rather than just leave anything.
Yeah.
Just in case there's something on the table.
Yeah. And it's like, well, I'm deloading next week anyway. Does it really matter if I go to failure and then do a drop set after that, or, you know, do some partials or negative reps or whatever kind of thing? So I think it's just, that's sort of what I've sort of gone with. So this progression, build up to a deload and then reassess performance. So yeah, I found that works really effective. But I think, I like to change up my programming every now and then as well. So when I started training, I did almost exclusively hypertrophy work for probably the first 7 or 8 years. And then when I first started doing powerlifting, I'd already sort of plateaued my physique a little bit. And then it's just like I almost got this like second wind, because I was working in these like rep ranges with long rest breaks. And the first time I deadlifted decent weight and stuff like that before I'd built my back with tons of like chin-ups, pull-ups, rows and pull-downs and stuff like that. And it's just like a different stimulus on the body kind of thing. So sometimes just identifying areas like sort of to keep you a little bit more well-rounded, I think is one of the keys as well. Like looking at an area, like if you got really good top-end strength but kind of low strength endurance, I think, well, let's bring that one up as well, because I guess you get those diminishing returns with anything you sort of excel at to a certain point. It just sort of the work you put in versus the reward you get out of it sort of becomes less and less and less, and then it's like, well, okay, maybe I can build up this sort of area. And I think a lot of sort of bodybuilding sort of is sort of it's quite well-rounded.
Yeah, I think too many people are perhaps married to a certain day split, rep range, exercises, etc. I'd love to get your take on as well. You mentioned a little bit of it there, but how often you like to change exercises, and then what your ideologies are around, exercise selection. And to give context, I find that, again, experimenting over the years, there's only be so many chords on a guitar, but people keep making new songs, right? But I see a lot of things in the gym that people do that have a really low return on investment, especially as a beginner. And going back to what you said before, that full body split, Jeff Nippard and a lot of the research now on like minimum effective dose training and even full body training, and how I find, again, this is contradictive. And again, I speak to Joe about this. I almost feel that some things that I do now have gone back to what I used to do as a beginner, but in more an advanced setting. And what I mean is I have a very auto-regulative approach where I'm still making sure I'm looking at the main metrics, because again, if you're not assessing, you're kind of guessing, and I want to make sure I'm still progressing in some way, shape or form. I also know that I'm not going to make the same gains that I did when I first walked in the gym. But as long as I'm understanding, okay, I'm doing at least this much volume, I'm moving through these rep ranges, and also making sure that I actually feel it. Like I am big on like, okay, like sure, different rep ranges. And it's not just about like time under tension. I think people take that too far, but going, can I really identify the muscle groups I'm using here? And just making these little nuanced changes, even just where my elbows are, my shoulders, and these little, and I'm like, you know what? My training now just feels so much different. It's those little things that you almost can't touch and feel, where when I was younger, it's like, oh, someone said, oh, where do you feel it? I'm like, I'm kind of here and here, and obviously that takes time. It's muscle memory and it's practice and repetition. And like you said, you get that high frequency in the early days is great. I mean, I used to train twice a day. I mean, it's terrible, but I probably wasn't training at the intensity I needed, but I was practicing those movement patterns. And I look back and go, you know what? That was probably really conducive to me having good shape, and that skill acquisition that helped me like build on that and go, okay, well now we, like you did, we're going to do some longer rest breaks. We're going to change that frequency. We're going to focus on more volume and intensity. So I'd love to get your take on how you approach that, or what your thoughts are on, training creation, exercise selection, and again, keeping it simple, because a lot of people just do some crazy ass shit in the gym. And I'm like, well, man, just basics.
Yeah. In general, I think simple is good. One of the ways that I sort of brought up my chest was literally just doing heavier and more volume on the bench press. It was just that simple. It was kind of just like how much mechanical stress is on this body part, and then just build that up over time. And it's just such a simple strategy, but it just worked so well, rather than trying to do, like 4 different angles of like hitting this bit and that bit and everything, which I'd done before, but I just found that like just, building up. Well, I guess that sort of started when I trained, when I used to work at like Genesis Fitness, like years ago. My PT manager there just had this like enormous chest. It was just like stupid looking. And part of that was just like really good muscle insertions. But it was just like, what do you do for your chest? And he was just like, I just big bench press. And I think he bench pressed like, I think it was like 4 plates for a couple reps or something like that. And I was like, oh, he's got pretty big. And then he sort of would just like, well, if you can just bench press 3 plates for sets of 6, that's when he really started to see his chest grow. And it was kind of like almost like a bro talking to another bro, because I was just like, I was like, well, I don't know. I've been trying all this other stuff. I'm just going to give that a crack. And we just had we actually formed this group, and we called it like chest club. And we sort of like,
oh, there's a lot of people signing up for that right now.
And it was just like every Monday night, there's probably like a group of like probably 4 or 5 of us. And we'd sort of get together and, all just bench press and just like
hashtag chesticles.
Yeah.
As my friend used to say.
Yeah. And just I don't know, but it actually kind of worked. I got my 1RM up from I think 120 up to like 150-ish.
That's decent.
And then like my 1RMs have never been that impressive, but my volume at sort of around the sort of 70 to 80% mark has always been really good. So it's just like I would bring it back to say like 120-ish kilos and sort of be able to press that for say consecutive sets of 10 to 12, even though like my 1RM wasn't that crazy. And so it was just like, bringing it back. And that's what I found really helped is sort of like a lot of volume work, but just making sure that my strength was sort of up there. But I feel like to sort of go back to the question in terms of like exercise selection, how often would you change it? I think you don't really need to change it all that often. I think it's more practical to have like 1 or 2 primary exercises. Like it might be like a straight pressing movement that you want to get better at. It doesn't have to be bench press. It could be dumbbells. It could be a chest press machine, whatever. But just trying to add volume, add resistance, improve on that particular thing. And you want to see that really improve across time. And it might take a while. Like it took like a good couple of years to really see those changes. But then the same sort of thing with say like maybe, like a squat or a leg press or a lunge or a deadlift or whatever kind of thing, but picking a specific exercise or 2 that really relate to the body part that you're trying to improve, and just seeing that go up over time. And I probably change the accessory movements more frequently than I change like the compounds. And I think other times like that I would sort of recommend sort of changing exercises, like, you know, after say 12 weeks of like really heavy bench pressing, it's just like my elbows would be more problematic than like my chest. It's just like, oh, I'm good to bench again like on Friday, but my elbows are cooked kind of thing. So it was always my joints, which sort of like yeah, I don't know, I think for my structure, I'm a lot better in this sort of mid rep ranges, which, you know, probably explain, I'm probably more genetically prone to being like a bodybuilder versus a powerlifter kind of thing. It's just like top end kind of thing, maybe not so good, but drop it back to sort of that 70 to 80%, and I can sort of consistently maintain that work rate pretty well.
Yeah, there's always that balance between, and again, it's that depending on what phase you're in. You know, a lot of the time, if you're young and you can work on those main, you know, I say to clients all the time, like, look, there's only like 7 variations of movement pattern in the gym. Like squat variations, hip hinge variations, vertical and horizontal press and pull, isolation. You've got rotational and isometric. And like, once you understand that, you know, and I teach people over time, I'm like, you can start to see like how easy this is and not get confused by going, oh my God, there's all these machines in a commercial gym, which is great because it gives us a luxury of a little bit more variation, but it's still that main movement pattern. People go, oh, like, oh, actually, this is a lot simpler. But when you're young, you know, it's doing those big movements and getting as much muscle tissue as you can and getting as much strength as possible, because you can use that, like at Hold Your Own, we had that saying, it was strong looks strong. It's like, yeah, obviously, Nathan, but what do you mean? He's like, well, if you're strong, you can borrow that strength and you can get on all that pull down. You've got better grip strength. You can do more reps with a higher weight. Therefore, you can acclimate more volume. So therefore, you create the opportunity and the demand to build more muscle tissue. Yeah. And there's this constant kind of ebb and flow, but obviously you've got to prioritize one over the other. And I think we all hit that place where, like you said then, you're like, you know what, like, I feel like I could do this again, but like, man, my nervous system is smoked and my joints are just gone. You know what? I need to use a machine, or I need to use something, you know, in a different rep range that's not going to completely tax my nervous system. And I think that's where machines come in to play, even especially later on in the career. Like, again, reading Frank Zane's book and speaking to a lot of older bodybuilders, it's like, hey, like, you know, I used to use a lot of free weights. Maybe I went a bit OTT. So now it's like they're sprinkled in there. Like you said, you got your priority movements, and then it's, okay, I'm going to borrow this machine to actually just really get volume in. And that's a conundrum with programming, I find, as a coach. Like, people expect like the program to completely change every 4 weeks. And that's one of the first expectations I set. I'm like, hey, if we're going to make progress, like, it's not because I'm lazy. Like, it's because, like, if I teach you a skill, I don't just want to rip that carpet and then just completely change everything. People go, I got to keep the muscle guessing. I'm like, yeah, but the progression is built within the program. It's like you said before, it's within the rep ranges, the intensity, the form, the technique, the rest time. There's so many things, but people just think, oh, I need to change either the exercise or I need to add weight.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it's sort of like for fun or for interesting kind of thing as well, like being able to, I don't know, when you get clients that sort of might get a bit bored doing the same thing over and over. And it's just like, I don't know, do you want excitement or progression kind of thing? And I think it's just such a key principle to try and just progress over time with you know, that particular movement. If you keep changing it every other week or every month or whatever, it's just going to be harder.
And it's that balancing act, because you do need to satisfy that for a client, because they do need to be engaged. But at the same time, if you're changing everything too often, like you said, and that's exactly what I say. I'm like, look, at some point we're going to sacrifice possible progression for just changing something for the sake of it, for a different flavor of the month.
Yeah. Or just to, I don't know, I guess get them to validate you for feeling like you're doing something as a coach, even though you don't need to. And I feel like it's the same thing with diet. Like, if people are dropping weight, you're just like, yep, keep going kind of thing. It's just like, I don't know. Sometimes you feel that internal pressure, like, I feel like I need to do something just so that they think I'm doing something, even though it's impractical to change anything.
literally.
Yeah.
And because sometimes I don't know if do you know Luke Tulloch by any chance?
I don't know. Maybe I know a lot of people if I saw a photo.
He's got long hair, red head, glasses. He's in Europe at the minute. He's Australian, but I really love, like, I've had him on the podcast. He's become a good friend. I love what he does because it's so simplistic, and he talks about this a lot. And I'm like, oh, good. It's so refreshing to hear. Where he used this example where he had this client, and he came to him, and he's like, hey, like, I want to lose X amount of body fat, boom, boom, boom. And he's like, okay, like, we can do that. That's realistic. Here's the time frame. Set expectations. Anyway, 12 weeks later, client got to the goal. Guy turns around to him, and he's like, I kind of want my money back. And he's like, what? And he's like, yeah, I feel like I paid for all this weekly coaching and you made no adjustments. He's like, hang on. He's like, you came to me to get this goal. He's like, yep. He's like, did you achieve the goal? He's like, yes. He's like, so because I didn't make adjustments in your program and I actually kind of got you in the ballpark, but I still checked in with you every week, still answered any questions, you want your money back? He's like, yeah. And he's like, that's fucked up. He's like, so what if I made changes every week and you didn't get to the goal? Would you still feel then like you wanted a refund? And I was like, I still remember sitting in the car listening to this podcast, and it's just nice to hear your peers like have the same kind of mindset where, it's like, now I'll just chat to a client and I'm like, hey, like, if you want that, like, here's the caveat, but perhaps I'm not the best coach for you because I'm really interested in like high return on investment and people who actually want to do things that, it's not about being a all-out athlete for everyone, but I want to get people the best results, and I think we're all time poor, so why not do something that at least is a little bit more strategic and intelligent rather than just going, hey, I just, like, again, feel the pressure to change shit up because you're paying me. But it's like, I'm still giving you my time, I'm still focusing on your program, but I should be able to actually give you something straight off the bat that is far more intelligent than go, oh, I need to change it every week because maybe what I gave you wasn't good. Like, it's like contradictive.
Yeah, almost just like changing it for the sake of it. I feel like that's also where where I guess like social skills, communication skills, like leadership skills, like really probably almost as important, if not more important, in the role of a coach. Because this is something that sort of frustrated me sort of in my early days of coaching, because I come up with these like strategies. It's just like, like, this is definitely going to get results. But then I feel like half the battle is communicating that message to your client. I feel like it's more than half the battle. And it's kind of like, you can get them on board, then 100% they're going to get the results. But it's just getting them compliant and getting them to kind of trust you and not feeling like, oh, I have to make the adjustments, sort of pandering to their expectations rather than what it's actually going to work, kind of thing.
Adherence and compliance is key. And I think that's where a lot of coaches don't, like, that's not really taught in a lot of courses. I mean, like yourself, I did a degree, and that was a little bit more well-rounded than the standard 12-week course. And I think, it's your P plates, you got to keep going. But that business acumen, that communication skills, as you said, it's like, oh man, I got to get people, I got to talk to people, I got to, almost sell. It's like, well, you kind of do in the early days because you don't have a reputation. You got to do what you got to do. But like you said, you're really interested in the program design, the training, the nutrition. But it's that other stuff. And I feel like, unfortunately, that's why a lot of trainers don't have a good experience, because they're not actually given the skills. Some people are lazy, but they're not actually given that skill to jump off the board and go, hey, like, that shit's great. But if anything, you've got more than enough. Now you need to learn how to actually communicate this.
Yeah.
Otherwise, what's the point? You used an analogy before about your boss with a big chest. It's interesting because the first gym that I worked at, Zero Limits, I was 16 going on 17. I was in my first year of study, and I went down. It was a serious gym in my town. I used to live in New Zealand. It's a guy called Tony, and he used to be ex-SAS. Great physique, like similar height to us, but like jacked, real jacked, natural dude. And I was like, fuck. And I was like, Tony, I was like, what do you do? And I was kind of still in that, like, learning, like looking for a magic pill. And he's like, look, man, he's like, first of all, he's like, I don't think, he's like, do you track like your nutrition or your weights? I'm like, no. He's like, well, you probably want to start doing that because, then you can start like trying to beat it, progress, manipulate it. Anyway, remember, like, he was training chest one day and he's like, all right, chest day. And I'm like, cool, Mike, can I see what you do? He's like, sure. He's like, I don't have a lot of time. I've got half an hour. And I'm like, what? And he's like, yep. So this is what I'm going to do. So he just warmed up and just picked up the heaviest dumbbells and just pressed them for as many as he could. And he just went till failure. And by the time he'd obviously warmed up, he'd done like 10 sets. And he's like, that's it. Chest is done. Now, I'm not saying that everyone should go out and do that, but the principle there remained. Obviously, he built a lot of strength and a lot of size. But again, it's that same takeaway that your, PT manager had or boss. It was like contractile mechanical tension. And going back to what Joe's taught me and what I've learned over time, and this is where I see like the guys, I'm like, yeah, I've talked about feeling the muscle. That's all well and good. But I see people just sat on a cable doing this with a tricep, where I'm like, I think now more about those bilateral movements rather than a single arm. There's a time and a place, and go, how can I accumulate volume in a sensible movement pattern that really manipulates load on this muscle group to get, those fast twitch, tight beam muscle fibers. I need to get this muscle as big as possible. And at some point, obviously I've got to build that skill, build that volume, peak that intensity, and I need to push volume through it safely. So it's like, fuck, why wouldn't I choose like a skull crusher? Why wouldn't I choose like a heavy pull down, a close grip bench, things like that? And when you think like that and you understand, you're like, it kind of makes that decision making a lot easier. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's something that's
kind of, yeah. Like when you're kind of overwhelmed with all these different ways that you can do something, it's just like, all right, just keep it simple. Mechanical stress, increase volume over time, and just, to avoid like, just overcomplicating everything.
And we've got social media to thank for that as well, in that respect.
Just a quick one, guys, before we carry on with the podcast. For any of you who are interested in taking your health and physique to the next level, and you want to remove the guesswork, you're not quite getting the progress that you want, you're not seeing what you want to see in the mirror, and you're not feeling like you're really moving in the right direction, then click the link in the bio below, the apply button, where you can contact me. We can organize a free consultation, no obligation, and discover whether it's a good fit as coach and client. All right, back to it.
I want to talk about like nutrition. I want to talk about posing as well. I want to touch on those points. Again, this is probably a fun question because I know people are going to be interested. Again, disclaimer, I know there's no magic, but what are some of, your beliefs around nutrition, and how do you like to run nutrition, i.e. like run us through a typical day? People are obviously interested. I want to do this because I kind of want to humanize it as well.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of stigma around like people got this like fucking magic food combination and they're like, yeah, you've got to do this at this time and I've got to have this. And it's like, no, again, basic. So I'd love to get your viewpoints on it. And obviously if you feel comfortable sharing kind of what you do now, and I guess you're in more of a building phase at the minute.
Yeah. Well, at the moment, I'm kind of like intuitively eating, but I mean, I guess a lot of that intuition is built on like years of tracking as well.
Yeah.
So I normally just try and have like protein like 4 to 5 times a day, and then I'll mix different carbs in with that protein for most meals, and then I'll have a little bit of fats, but the macros tend to work out roughly 2 grams per kilo body weight per day protein, a gram per kilo of body weight fat, and then just the rest from carbs. And then whether I modulate the total intake up or down is just kind of depending on the results I'm getting, how I'm feeling, and what's happening on the scale and my physique kind of thing. So it's kind of quite simple. It's kind of like I normally have like some sort of structured plan that's a little bit loose. So it's just like I need that sort of
Flexibility.
Yeah, flexibility combined with some organizational structure as well. Because I feel like if I'm simply just one or the other, I feel like it's just not as effective. So you can be like too rigid and be like, all right, I have to have like four eggs and then chicken and rice and then chicken and rice and this and this. And it's just so rigid. You feel like it requires a lot of discipline, but then you sort of gradually resent dieting and you sort of give up a lot of that freedom and stuff like that. But then it's just like, I feel like if I'm too loose with it as well, I just get overwhelmed by choice, because I'm like, I could have, 20 grams of this, 40 grams of that. And you just spend all day just tracking what you can and can't have. So I like to sort of have, a pretty loose strategy. Like I'm going to have like maybe 2 options for say protein in the morning. It might be like eggs or a protein shake. Those are my options kind of thing. And then carbs, it'd be like oats or maybe rice cakes or something. And it's just like it just quicker decision making as well. So it's just like alleviate some of the mental load from dieting as well, because I don't want to be thinking about like food all day long. It's just like, all right, what's going to get me results and stop me going insane from eating the same thing over and over again. And I sort of do that the same. I have like a protein source at like lunch as well, and it might be, you know, chicken, fish, salmon, or whatever, you know, the typical like protein, or sometimes I'll mix it up with like, you know, another protein shake. Every now and then I'll have like a vegan option in there as well, just to kind of like mix it up a little bit. And then carbohydrates mostly from whole foods, so like rice, potatoes, sweet potato, carrot, corn, starchy vegetables, oats, cereals, that sort of stuff. But then I'm pretty flexible with it as well. So, you know, build in, you know, a little bit of junk every now and then. So, you know, some pizza every now and then and all that sort of stuff. So I'm not like overly strict. I feel like as long as I'm getting like the majority of my foods from like quality whole foods, then it sort of takes care of itself a little bit. But I think it's just having that self-awareness to not sort of go too far off track as well. But yeah, my diet's usually just super simple.
Again, basic.
It's just basic. Yeah, there's no sort of magic to it, like, you know, mixing, you know, cayenne pepper and apple cider vinegar to give me fat burning properties or anything. It's just it's just like, yeah, stick within a good range for protein, and fat and carb ratios I'm super flexible with, as long as like I'm not in a giant surplus or a deficit. I mean, and that depends on the goal I'm hitting at the moment as well. I'm a little bit more meticulous, and well, it's a lot more meticulous in preps. I mean, like, but it doesn't mean that I guess my off season is like completely loose and out the window. I'm not tracking anything. It's just I've been doing it for so long that it's kind of just like
It's a habit.
Yeah, a habit. And I sort of explain it in a way that sort of like I guess marathon runners and pacers and stuff like that. It's like if someone's, you know, used to running, you know, 5-minute Ks or whatever, it's just like, even without a GPS, there's people who can just run at a certain pace and they just know how fast they're going, kind of thing. And they can just feel it, kind of thing. And I feel like dieting is a bit like that. If you've just been doing it years and years and years, it's kind of just like, oh, like I'm maintaining, you know, I can maintain like single digit body fat without having to track anything. So I can just kind of feel it intuitively from years of doing it. And I think that won't happen initially. I feel it's just like, oh, okay, I know, you know, when I look at a plate of food, roughly what's in it, and my brain is just processing all this information subconsciously to the point where it's like I don't have to like meticulously track it. I can kind of get quite far and know what I'm doing, like just on autopilot sort of thing. But I think a lot of that's through just, you know, doing it years and years and years and sort of tracking everything for just long periods of time. So you sort of build that into your routine.
Yeah. No, I completely relate with that, you know, and I think it's a great place to be, you know, where you can get to that point where it's not stressing you out. I like to use like stabilizers on a bike. You learn, you know, because tracking, because, you know, sometimes the clients be like, oh God, you know, it's that whole like, oh, I've got to track. And people make it a thing and they don't want to. I'm like, hey, it's not forever. This gives you the skills to understand what's in your food, nutritional literacy, and then, you know, you're able to discern over time. And like you said, you don't think about it. I say to people, I'm like, oh, do you think about walking now? Like, no. I'm like, right, when you first walked, trust me, you don't remember. It was fucking hard.
Yeah.
Way harder than tracking food.
Yeah.
But now you do it subconsciously. So it's, I think a lot of the time there's that belief there. But as you said, you have that default, you know, you have a little bit of a backbone, so you're not like fucking too loose. And I think like a path too. It's like in the off season, it's like the path's a little bit wider. You know, you don't want to go on the bloody into the forest, but you can, you know, sail along it. And then in comp prep, you just tighten that up. And it's a bit of a like the path is a bit more narrow because, you know, the goal is more specific and there's a timeline. And, you know, we want to remove any room for error or a lot of room for error. We can still have flexibility. And we're seeing now a lot of great athletes who are able to intuitively prep themselves, you know, to that large degree. And then I think it's preference as well. So it's refreshing to hear, that's for sure. when it comes to that, because again, I think there's a lot of misconceptions around nutrition, and I think it causes a lot of stress. I find that especially with females, and I get it. We're wired a little bit differently, but I think there can be a lot more pressure from society to look a certain way, and even like with food choices, and people think, oh, no, I've got to cut out food groups, and I'm like, you're actually creating a bigger problem.
Yeah.
By cutting, unless you have an adverse reaction to it, I think a lot of people just end up, unfortunately, with eating disorders because they avoid foods for so many years, and then they just can't control their intake, which is a shame.
Yeah. I think it's so common in physique sports as well.
Yeah.
Even like, it doesn't have to be like a full blown like anorexia or bulimia kind of thing. It can even be like
it's like a mild one,
distorted type binge eating disorder type thing, which I think like probably it's more common to experience that than not experience it. I think particularly once you get into that low body fat range where it's just like you see people doing a prep and you think, oh, I'd like to do that, and you don't realize how brutal it is on your body until you get into that back end, and then it's kind of just like you finish your prep and it's just like, I've just eaten all this food and I can't stop eating. And then even when you're doing other stuff, you can't stop thinking about food. And it's just like your mind is sort of control. It's just like something's happened. And it's just like, I don't have control over my actions anymore. And you sort of have like this fluctuations up and down, and you have this like compulsion. I got to get back in shape because I used to look like this. And you sort of create these weird associations and stuff like that. So I think that's one of the things that I really like to coach people through as well, is like sort of going through that, but then also like being able to figure out better ways to do it, and sort of communicating that to people, and having strategies to avoid that, but also sort of noticing behaviors in people, and sort of like being able to intervene or create some sort of guidance, so that like, because I just think that's so common.
It is. And it's super important to give people that guidance, like you said, and skill set, and even let them know, hey, like this is what's going to happen. This is one time that you can't trust your hunger because it's not, it's not in alignment. It's skewed because of, going to very, very low body fat percentiles. And, physique sports, I say to people, this is, you don't just pay to play. Like you can go and get a basketball and join a team. Yeah, you won't be in the NBA straight away, but like you can just play. But with bodybuilding, like there is a level of skill set that's, should be developed before you take someone in the comp prep. And I even think, you've got to do due diligence and sometimes say, hey, like maybe we spend a bit of time building some more skills, like learning about nutrition training, like building some more tissue, doing some mini cuts, and then, obviously giving someone that support. And then, like you said, on the reverse diet, rather than just going, yep, cool, I'll take your money, I'll get you shredded, and then see ya. It's like, oh, fuck, like you just fuck someone up. And then they have this, unfortunately, that can do it. And for some people for decades. Yeah. And they have this constant cycle of binge eating. So,
and then a really negative view about fitness, bodybuilding, competing, and that whole industry is like, just, ruined. And it's just like, I don't know. I think it's common for people to go through that phase too, where you sort of start resenting it and be like, man, this is bullshit kind of thing. But then you sort of realize that, I think there's a lot of disgruntled people who have sort of come out of physique sports and sort of bag on them and stuff like that.
Correct.
Versus like, I think it's sort of tempting to do that, as opposed to looking at those issues and being like, well, how could we do it in a better way? How could we make this more safe and effective? And, because people are going to keep doing it. It's getting more and more popular. It's just like, rather than just like, that's just shit, I don't want to have anything to do with it. It's kind of just like, oh, actually there's just ways to fix it and do it better. And it's never going to be perfect, and you're probably going to experience some of these issues, but just sort of educating people and letting them know that, this is, like you say, it's not like basketball. This is part of the game. Is just like, there's going to be all these things. And I feel like if people sort of see it coming, it's easy to deal with as well.
Well, this is exactly right. And like you said, I think there's a lot of great people out there doing good work at the minute, like in that space where it's like, hey, you don't have to be all in or all out. People are going to do it. There's definitely better ways of getting to very low body fat percentiles and still maintaining sanity in and outside of that, and being able to create a good relationship and a time and a place to know how to get to that shape, but also to then get out of that shape, but keep the physiology and the psychology in a sound place, which is, easier said than done. I know, but it's a good point, man.
And I think identifying timing as well. So sometimes it can, I think like to do like a comp prep sometimes, like if you're in like a bad place in like many areas of your life, it's just like, I don't know, is this person really going to be able to get through the commitment kind of needed, like for this, and sort of, rather than, or like, do they need more time to build more tissue, like you were saying before, like rather than just sort of, okay, like here's just any sort of person, put them through my program and then come out the other side and be shredded kind of thing. Like, having, I don't know, being able to like just identify that specific circumstance, because I feel like it's not for everyone as well.
This is true. I talk a lot of people out of it. And I say that in a good way, because people go, what do you mean in a good way? I said, well, I could badmouth it. Yeah. But I often say to people, again, it's about setting that expectation. A lot of people go, I want to be shredded. I'm like, describe to me what shredded looks and feels like to you. And oftentimes it's not shredded, and you show people what shredded is, and they're like, I don't want to look like that. I'm like, well, that's, a colloquial term of shredded. It's a very low body fat percentile. People quote body fat. Well, people say, hey, I want to be this body fat. And I'm like, okay. So if we got to that body fat and you still didn't look like this, would you still want to keep going? Yes. Okay. Well, it's like, so is it the number are you after, or is it the look and feel that you're after? And most of the time it's beach lean, as we would, again, use it as a, a casual term. So then if it's like, hey, well, let's do that first. And if you can handle that and you like that, and you may want to display this physique on a stage in front of people, and you want to take it to the extreme, then, and once we build skills and this, that, and the other, like you said, we can take it to that place. But I often feel that conversation doesn't exist for a lot of people, or they don't get that opportunity, or the coach doesn't give them the opportunity. They sell all, like, people always see the photo shoots. They always see the competing. They always see, the glamorous behind it, but they don't realize like all of the discipline that goes into it. So again, people are selling the result, but as you and I both know, it's the journey. And I was actually going to ask you, and I think this is a nice jumping off point to that, what your biggest takeaways have been from the journey and the process of getting to the stage. Because I know for me, it's quite a stoic thing, because you're just so in tune with your body. I almost liken it to being like a vampire, because your senses are just so heightened and you have such a finite amount of energy, and it's such a selfish thing because you've got to be so precise. But I also like to maintain my relationships and do what I can and go, well, I've chosen this. So the suck, the pain, the suffering that will come, it's like, I accept that, but that doesn't mean everyone else has to suffer around me because of the choice I've made. No, I definitely agree with that. I think it's definitely something that people really need to communicate, with their like partners, friends, or work colleagues, or whoever, I guess. And sort of, I think one of the biggest takeaways through going through that process is just because I can get so absorbed into something. Well, I guess it's like, like to the point where it's just like I will just sort of let the rest of my life fall apart while I'm like aiming for this particular show. And I guess like it's, no, I don't know. I feel like with anything, there's good and bad, because the good thing was that like there's just not that many other people doing that. Most people are still prioritizing the rest of their life and stuff like that, and it's almost like a really reckless thing to do. But I feel like people who are like elite in their thing, like when you look at like, obsessive athletes giving interviews and stuff like that, they all like that. They're all like that. They're all just like, tunnel vision, all in kind of thing. And well, not all, I guess the ones that like, I guess like really idolize is someone who can maintain all those other things. But I think it's like sort of, it's harder to do. It's sort of just like that concept of sort of all in sort of thing. And that binary. Gets like black, white, on, off. Like you always hear that person who's like, oh yeah, my partner's in prep, he's a cunt at the minute. I'm like, that's not an excuse in my mind. I think that's not on, but continue. I guess lucky for me, I haven't I've been single through most of my preps and stuff like that. But
I think that, yeah, I think one of the things, if you're like someone who's like super competitive, you can kind of get, yeah, really sort of carried away in that. But I think it's not unique to bodybuilding. I think it's something across, like, I don't know, if you're the CEO of your business or whatever, and you're trying to make that successful kind of thing. It's just like, oh, okay, well, you might be putting in, 18-hour days or whatever, and neglecting like other things in your life kind of thing, because it's just like, I can't let my business collapse or whatever, or just any other thing that you're, competitive with. And I have been sort of guilty of this with like bodybuilding, or even like last year I was at film school, and basically like making films and stuff like that. It's kind of just like, you just work ridiculous hours, and kind of like you sort of just like neglecting other things in your life, because it's just like, I got a deadline, this film is going to be screened in front of all these people on this date, and it's just like the color grading's not finished, the audio editing's not finished, all this sort of stuff. And it's just like, you just kind of just like let other things fall by the wayside to get that done. But then with yeah, kind of bodybuilding as well, I think making sure that you have sort of a plan of where you want to go, what you want to do kind of thing, and making sure that's kind of aligned with your values and what you're willing to sacrifice as well. Because I think if that's in alignment, then it's fine, because you might understand those risks and make that choice and say, okay, well, I really think I have a shot at winning this competition or this pro card or whatever it is. And that's, at the top of the priority list. And then looking at, okay, what other responsibilities in my life do I have to manage? And, how can I effectively manage those, and that sort of thing. And you might just decide, well, actually, I'm single, and, I'm not tied down anywhere or doing anything. I'm just going to go all in on this thing. And I think that's fine. But I think sometimes you can sort of get into that trap where it's just like, you don't mean to do it like that. You kind of just, you have a check-in with your coach, and it's just like, well, we're going to have to cut your calories to this much or that much or whatever. And then you're kind of just like, like struggling with this and struggling to maintain everything else, because it's the process is so hectic. And then you don't realize until you're kind of in there. And then, yeah, I don't know. So I think one of I'm going off on a tangent here, but to get back to one of the takeaways is just making sure that you have like those other elements of your life where you kind of want them. So I think like your work life, your sort of intimate relationships, your friendships and community, those sorts of things. And then, other stuff other responsibilities that you might have going on outside of that, and sort of making sure that, those things don't fall down kind of thing, and sort of understanding that priority. It's just like, in order to get this thing perfect, some of these things might suffer a little bit, but it's just like, how far are you willing to let them suffer kind of thing.
Yeah.
And that might even mean sort of, sacrificing how many training sessions you can do every now and then, or like even pulling out of the comp kind of thing. But it's a very difficult balance to get. And I think that's
the facade though, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like it's almost like you can't, and you kind of nailed it there. Like, there is sacrifice, but like you said, what are you willing to sacrifice? See, again, that's where the communication comes in. People don't have those conversations, because people are like, I'm going to go comp prep. And I'm like, what do you do for work and how many hours you work? Because that's going to suffer a shit. Like, if you're doing something that's very mentally taxing, like, that's going to be tough. Like, are your relationships stable? Financially, are you in a good place? Because like, all of a sudden, like, everyone's stressed, right? We live in this world, everyone's running around. We need stress, but people are just overly stressed about shit. And then you go and add that on the top of it, and I'm like, you've got a recipe for fucking disaster. Literally, you start doing that. So as you said, it's like going, right, well, having those conversations with the people around you, or, having a look and addressing those key things and going, right, I'm in a good position. It's never going to be perfect. Life's not smooth sailing, but then going, cool, this is what I'm willing to sacrifice, but here's the bare minimum. And I think, again, if you've got like, someone in your life that you're in a relationship with, or you've got kids, or you've got a work job, even just having a chat and saying, hey, look, man, I'm going to be going all in. I'm going to give 100% here, but, I might have to give up the extra hours, or I might fade a little bit towards the end. Can you support me in this? And having that chat with your partner, hey, can you support me in this? But I'm going to show up, but I might not be able to be like that 120, that extra, but can you? And they'll go, yeah, like I can support you with that, but if you don't say anything and all of a sudden you just don't turn up, or you're not showing up, I think that's where it's a bit shit. People go, yeah, but like I'm competing. It's like, yeah, but like the world doesn't revolve around one single person. And that's an interesting mindset in and of itself,
Yeah. I think even on that, I think sometimes it can be quite difficult. So I think there was like maybe 1 or 2 preps where I did have a partner, and I did explain to her. I said, oh, look, like I tend to not get like as agitated as I get docile. Like I'm just like, when I'm sort of, I think sub 6% body fat, I'm just like so much brain fog, and it's just like tasks are difficult. So it's kind of just like I'm way less animated in life, and it's kind of just like I'm a zombie kind of thing.
And zombie mode.
The
colloquial term.
And even when I explained that, she was like, yeah, that's fine, and everything like that. But I think it just like was still a shock when I was like that much zombie, because I was just like barely present, and she'd tell me something, and then I was like, I don't know, it's just like my cognitive capacity was so reduced that I'd just be like, what was that kind of thing? And it was just like that all the time. And I can imagine how infuriating that would be.
Yeah.
And kind of particularly like used to someone who sort of, if I have been like, really supportive and listening and caring and all this sort of stuff, and being able to give back into the relationship, and all of a sudden it's kind of just like feels like it's not for a very long time with me. Like I'm pretty good in prep until about, I'd say 1 month out. So I'm like that for maybe a month, the last month of a show. But then if I do like 2 or 3 shows back to back, it's kind of dragging and stuff like that. And then it can be like like an issue. It's just like, where did this person go?
Yeah.
It's like a different person for that time. But I think it's like, communicating that as best you possibly can. But then also, they have the freedom to sort of choose, and they sort of see that and be like, how many times are you going to do this? Kind of thing. And then,
and I think that goes against the whole like concept and maxim. People go, you chalk and cheese. You need someone very, very different to you. And I think, true to a degree. You don't want to have someone who's like into exactly the same thing as you. But I think the ethics and value system has to align in a relationship. This is a bit left field, but I always think in like someone who's like an elite athlete or competes at a high level, you actually almost need someone who is within that scope, whether they're an athlete in another sport, because they actually relate. And like you said, you can explain it, but you can tell when someone's not into it. And it's a lifestyle, like in terms of you're always going to be healthy. So if your partner's like not even into that, and they're like, I actually want to go out and party and do this and do that, and I'm not into it, it's like, it's never going to fucking work. And it's nice to have a rear gunner. Like it's nice to have someone who's got your back and maybe can help you when you forget your fucking meal, or because you are going to fuck up at some point. It's nice to have someone that can kind of hold that space as well. So I think, when it comes to fit relationships, it's a good combination.
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about your time now, like on the stage, and I'd love to know like the journey and the evolution of like when you started competing all the way to like winning the IFBB. And I know it's something I want to compete in next year. I'm a natural athlete, and again, I think whatever you want to do, that's great. But I'd love to just know that journey, like what it was like competing on that stage, and even like any pressures around that, or even like politics that might have evolved, because I know, like, again, it's a federation where most people are enhanced, and again, each to their own, but it's amazing. Like for me as a natural athlete, it was great to see. It was very inspiring to see someone like yourself. I felt like Alberto Nunez and a lot of other guys as well, just to see like how far people can take it naturally. For me, like that's what I'm interested and curious in. It's not to like downplay the other. It's just, hey, like, I want to know what I can do without any enhancements, So I'd love to talk through that, or whatever you feel comfortable sharing.
Definitely. So like my journey from when I started competing. So I started competing in 2006 as a junior, and I it was nothing I ever planned. I was doing like prac hours at like a fitness studio as part of my degree, and there were a couple guys there who were getting ready for a natural bodybuilding show, and I was in pretty good shape just because of how obsessive I was with my fitness lifestyle and everything like that.
How old were you at the time?
I was probably 20-ish, maybe 21.
Right.
Yeah, maybe 20. Yeah, I think I did my first show when I was like maybe 21.
Cool.
And so I was pretty close to comp lean already. Just because I didn't eat enough food, to be honest. It was just like for the amount of training I was doing. So I was just like, yeah. And it was just like because I was leaner than the guys that were basically getting ready for the show. I was like, I was just like, oh, okay, like I just live my life like this, because I got no other shit going on, kind of thing. So I was just like, I was like, oh, okay. And then I just thought, oh no, way too small to do a bodybuilding, because I was still a small person. Like I was probably like maybe 60 something kilos, 66 kilos or something like that. I think I did my first show around 64 kilos or something like that. So I did my first comp prep in like, I think I had 4-week prep. And it's just like, and then
nice.
and then yeah, came like third in the state, and then 2 weeks later won a state show. And then I think it was just like it was maybe less competitive back then, but I sort of had like, you know, just a pretty high training age for my age as well. So being like starting weights really young and really getting into it. And I think if I hadn't have done well at those shows, I might have just, you know, done it and sort of been like, oh, this is a bit of fun, and then go back to whatever I was going to do with my life. But I think it was that enticement of like, oh, I won a state show, you know, and then I came back the next year and I did some like national shows and I did pretty well there as well. And it was kind of just like this thing that sort of kept going, and just like, oh, well, I've got some, you know, got some talent in this, and it sort of suits the lifestyle that I like living. And then I just kept going. And I think today I've done, I think 40 shows, I think now.
Wow.
And so, or maybe not 40 separate individual events, but 40 times that I've sort of competed. So some of them I might compete, you know, 4 or 5 times back to back in the same season, because that's just a thing. So I haven't done like 40 preps or anything.
For sure. Makes sense.
But I just kind of slowly progressed up the sort of the natural ranks, and sort of went from winning junior shows to winning open shows, to winning overalls, to going and winning. 2014 I went over to America and won the Natural Olympia, INBA. And then a couple years later I won a professional Natural Olympia in classic physique, and I think that was the first year they had it as well.
I was just gonna say, was that when they brought it back, sort of thing? Or made it a category, because that's kind of what it was. Initially it just changed.
Yeah. Well, even when I went over there the first time before classic physique had come back, I was still, I got a pair of custom made sort of trunks that sort of resembled like the Speedos, and I did like a very classic posing routine, and I didn't expect to score very well because of it. I just thought it was, oh, this is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
So
that's what you wanted.
Yeah, this is what I think bodybuilding should be. This is what I like, and I just want to express my art in that way. And also the routines are not really scored either. So it's just like, oh, well, you know,
bit of fun.
This is my time on stage. This is what I want to do, kind of thing. And it went really well. And then, when they had sort of classic physique, I went back and I won that. And then, around that same time, I was sort of doing IFBB shows as well, because I think it was, I can't remember, it was 2015 was the first Arnold Australia, I think. And then I was just like, oh my God, I have to do this show, kind of thing. But then I'd also just become like a PNBA pro. And then I think, you know, they didn't like people competing in other federations. So I don't know, I'd go over there, compete in that show. And then, well, IFBB didn't either. So it was kind of just like, I was a lot quieter on social media until like maybe a while after the shows had finished, because I was like, well, I don't want to post all this stuff and then get banned from the next show, because I used to do that to people.
Yeah, which is pretty like, it's quite childish, really.
Yeah, I think particularly because like at the end of the day, we're still like customers. It's not like we're on a
Contract. Not getting paid.
Not getting paid. Yeah, being like, here's 50 grand salary. Now you have to stick with us. Then it's like, okay, fair enough.
Yeah.
But it's kind of just like, no, I'm still paying you to compete in these shows. I'm technically a customer. If I want to go and compete,
and also when you're shredded, like, fuck me, it's not a long time, is it? So you might as well do a few shows. Like you said before, you generally do 2 or 3. Why'd you do it once? I was up there for 10 minutes. Great.
So that's what I'd do. I'd be like, yep, compete in all these, and be like, oh, Pete hasn't posted anything about his win. And then like a month later, it's just like, okay, cool, I haven't got disqualified from this show. I've done it. Now I can post everything, kind of blast it all out. But it was
clever.
I did like the Arnold's, 2015 and 2017. I won the lightweights, and then I tried to get my IFBB pro card when Classic came out, because before that I didn't even consider being an IFBB pro. It just wasn't something that was really on the radar. Because like my competition weight even today is still, like,
I was going to ask you that, actually.
69 kilos.
Yeah.
So it's just, I got my IFBB pro card competing at 69 kilos. And my stage weight hasn't really changed since probably 2018, I think. I think I was still gaining mass, gaining stage weight very, very slowly from like, starting around 63, 64 kilos up to, maybe 69 kilos. It sort of was the peak around 2018. And then sort of, since then it sort of was like, oh, I'm not really getting any bigger. I just kind of look similar, but slightly harder, slightly
more muscle maturity.
denser.
Yeah, retain more muscle maybe on the way in. It's like those little small
Yeah.
which is really good to hear, and I think for people to understand as well.
And I think that's sort of the way it is as a natural competitor as well. It's just like once you've hit, say, maybe 10, 15 years of training, it's kind of like you're probably just not really going to gain much stage weight. If you do gain stage weight, it might be a kilo or something in 3 years or whatever.
Yeah.
It's like,
usually fuck all.
it's just, it's hardly anything. It's like, just a 2 year off season to put on a 1 kilo of muscle mass for my next season kind of thing. But you'll look very different at the same weight. It's kind of just like, 69 kilos here, 69 kilos there. And it's just like,
interesting, eh?
Yeah.
That's that mechanistic science where it does get complicated. So like, how does that work? But
yeah. And I think it's just like that muscle maturity of in theory, it's just like, well, I have broken down these muscles and rebuilt them like hundreds of times. Maybe it's that. I don't know. But
I bet people as well would think like, I don't know, I'm sure you've got this, but what weight did people think you were? Because I bet they were throwing stuff like 80, 90 kilos at you, because you do look big on stage and you've got great proportions. It's interesting when you tell them, they must be like, oh, what?
Yeah. I think most people think I would compete sort of high 70s competing in the under 80s class, but I'm high 60s competing in the 70s, which is why I guess doing so well in the sport, and particularly like winning the Arnolds in the lightweight, I'd be getting ready sort of backstage and people would be like, what class are you competing in? And I'd be like, 70s. And they'd just be surprised. Like, how are you making weight in that category? And I don't know, I guess I'm lighter than I look, which is, I guess, like very favorable. So I'd say most people sort of, when they comment, they sort of think that I would be sort of competing in the sort of high 70s, mid to high 70s. I think people who have been doing it for a long time though, and they're used to seeing different athletes and how they look, and they sort of realize that they're sort of a little bit closer. They're sort of like, he's probably somewhere around the sort of low 70s kind of thing, which is probably a little bit close. And I'm probably lean enough to compete even at sort of 73, 74 kilos. I start getting those striations in the glutes, but I feel like there's just a huge difference between, say, even 6% body fat and 5% body fat. It doesn't sound like a lot, but it's just like,
People underestimate a percent,
It's
especially at that level.
Yeah, and it's so hard. It's kind of just like prepping, and to get that last little bit off. And it's the difference between seeing someone walk out on stage and they just look kind of really good versus being kind of freakish and kind of just like having like striations in so many places. Because I guess under the lights and everything, like most people are going to look pretty good, but then it's just like you get that sort of that standout level kind of conditioning. And so I probably, don't even need to push it as low as that, and I might even sacrifice a little bit of muscle, but I just find it's more beneficial to be that little bit leaner and drier rather than sort of,
have a little bit more
fullness and a bit more fluffiness.
I find as well, being a smaller dude, like that's one of the elements like we need to focus and manipulate. It's like, I'm not a mass monster. It's like, for me, like presentation, symmetry, and conditioning are like what is going to get me the result, if I'm going to do well, because I'm not going to come on and surprise people with my size, but I got to create the illusion. I look to him. I don't know if you know a guy called Brian Whittaker, but like phenomenal, just super humble dude, very much like yourself. And his conditioning is just absolutely uncanny. Like, it is. I don't think there's people who like, he is like, I don't think you can get any leaner than that without going to hospital.
Yeah.
People throw out like 2%, 1%. I'm like, you can't technically get to that. Like, otherwise you kind of just borderline dead.
Yeah.
But people
throw
out some crazy percentage. Like, it was funny. Like, just on a side note, I was listening to Joe Rogan and Ronnie Coleman. God bless him, lovely guy.
Point 3.
But he's like, I was like in the off season. I was like 3% in the off season, and I'm like, the amount of people that are going to listen to this and actually believe that, and it's like, it's convoluted. It's hard because people are like, I want to be like 2% like Ronnie. I'm like, who am I to tell Ronnie that he's wrong? Who the fuck am I? Like, I'm not an Olympia guy, but it's interesting.
Yeah.
But back to what you were saying, man. Again, that conditioning. So continue on. So you compete at 69. You're in the IFBB. You win the lightweight.
Yeah. And then I came runner up, like, I think about 3 or 4 times. Like,
I was watching, bro. I remember
going for that. Yeah.
It's just like, damn, I thought I was gonna get it this year. I'm like, come on, surely.
Yeah.
Am I right in saying that even some of the other guys on stage were a little bit surprised that you didn't take the win?
I think
kind of felt that.
Yeah, I think there was like maybe twice that it could have gone either way. I think I only just got in 2018. I only just got beaten by Paul Vu. IFBB Pro. So yeah, he was like phenomenal athlete, and sort of is that little bit leaner, a little bit drier. I think I had him on like fullness, muscularity, symmetry, proportion, probably posing, but like he just had that next level sort of conditioning that I think just sort of pushed him over. And it was just like, I think that was something that he really could have gone 50-50. And watching the video back where I was in the middle and then they put him in the middle, then I was in the middle, then they put him in the middle. And it was just like this, it must have been pretty tight. And then a couple weeks after that, I went over to New Zealand and I lost in another one that was probably like 50-50 as well. And so I'm not sour about any of those that I sort of just came runner up, because I feel like I got beaten by like really quality athletes. And they did beat me in some aspect. It's just like I might have had them in terms of like that overall sort of classic sort of look, but they just came in with that little bit extra dryness and leanness. And I think that's maybe one of the things that they were waiting for me to get. They were just like, when's Pete going to hit that next level sort of conditioning? And I did that in 2020, where it's just like I was maybe like I was the same weight, but I was just that little bit drier, a little bit harder. And just like I feel like I lost a tiny bit of fullness. And I think particularly as a natural athlete, it's just like you don't maintain that fuller look at those lower, like you see the natural guys who are super shredded, it's just like they get slightly more stringier and stringier and stringier. And it's just like I got to the point where it's just like I was maybe a little bit flatter, but I just had that sort of hardness that was a little bit better than what I was in 2018. And then I ended up winning that pro card. And so, yeah, I still haven't decided whether I'm going to compete as a pro yet. But I think it was just one of my big goals is just like, oh, I've come this close. How cool would it be to win an IFBB pro card as well, just in general, but even doing it as a natural athlete. Yeah.
Well, I guess, was there a sense of like, I guess because you've been at it for so long, relief, satisfaction? Was it a little bit surreal? Were you kind of going, like, fuck yeah, like I feel like I deserve this now because like I've done it again and again and again. I brought a better package every time.
Yeah. It was very surreal. It was just like this. Oh my God. Well, when I was backstage, I was kind of like, I don't know, like super. I get so anxious. I get very, very anxious in front of people. But like I was like super emotional. I was thinking, oh no, because I was freaking myself out, like looking at the other competitors. I'm like, it's gonna happen again. I'm gonna lose again. It's kind of just like, what are you doing, kind of thing. It's just like go out there and sort of. I think also that's why I incorporate some characterization into my stage presence as well, because I guess when you're on stage as a character, it's almost like kind of a shield sort of a thing, and it's easier just I'm projecting this sort of image and I'm like absorbed in this world that I'm creating, as opposed to everybody's looking at me. It's like I'm on stage, everyone's looking at Pete, and it's like, oh no, it's just I got to take the focus off myself and put it into trying to be present in that way. But like I don't know, when I finally like got it and they called me up, I was just like, it was really surreal, and it was just like all those years that I'd tried and failed, kind of finally getting it. It was just yeah, it was actually pretty amazing. Yeah,
it's one hell of a routine as well, man. Like incorporating the rows and stuff and like that. It's almost like you said, it was a bit like theatrical. There was almost a sense of like, I used to go to the theater, and when I was in the UK when I was young, it's like pantomime. It's kind of those elements. Was always like a romantic element to it as well. Had a lot of depth, and I think a lot of people really grasped onto that. And like you said, even if it's not part of the marking, it definitely has a bearing. It has a huge bearing for where the judges will go with that and what they think, and they can just see like dedication, time, discipline, like shows athleticism. It just shows so much like multi-dimensional elements to an athlete rather than just posing. And seldom do I ever see a great poser. I mean, we were at the IFBB show a couple of months ago, and we were talking to Jay Swole, and it was like, he stood out as soon as he came out, and it wasn't just because he had a great physique. That was the initial thing, but then he started moving and posing. I'm like, this is a little different, and I like to see that. I like to see someone who's like, you're unique. You catch my eye. There's something different about you. But now I'm watching you. Now I'm watching you, where I could be watching someone else. Like, and if I'm a judge, I know there's probably different. There are different elements, but like that's got to be a draw card, surely.
Yeah, and I think it's really good for the sport. And good from a connection standpoint with the audience, because I guess like as a competitor, but also as like an audience member, when you're watching something, if you don't feel any connection to what you're watching, it's harder to sort of become engaged. And I guess that's why they do all this sort of stuff with I don't know, like I guess like WWE or even UFC do a lot of stuff like that, where they have like this kind of dramaed sort of thing, and it's just like you're not just watching an event, it's just like you're following a character's journey through this sort of thing. But I think you can incorporate that on stage with posing routines and stuff like that, and you sort of get more of an insight, and then it's just like way more engaging.
Yeah, I think so. Definitely. It's something that I relate to, because I'm a little bit eccentric as well and artistic, so something that I'm probably a little bit more biased for, but why I think why a lot of people are going towards that classic physique, or even from a spectator standpoint, it's very interesting to watch. The athlete, even though it's just a minute, whatever it is, just gets the opportunity to show a bit of personality, because to the untrained eye, we've all got tan on, we're all lean, we all have different colored trunks, or even in classic, it's the same. It's like, what separates you apart from your haircut? Well, it's your stage presence, and that's a really big thing. I must ask as well, did you ever feel any pressure, or as a natural athlete ever consider taking performance enhancing drugs?
Yeah, I feel like there's a fair bit of pressure. Probably more pressure now than ever because now that I've sort of turned pro, the weight cap has increased. So before I was about 3 kilos under the weight cap. Now I'm about 8 kilos under the weight cap. So that's a lot of weight. And
that's a lot of muscle.
it's yeah. And then also like IFBB pros in classic physique, they're still really big. They just
Fuck yeah.
massively
Don't
big.
think people realize how big those guys are, man.
Yeah, they're just big, but sort of proportion and their structure is just very aesthetic. But they're still like almost as big as bodybuilders. But just, you know, like sort of smaller waists and sort of different proportions and that sort of thing. And just I wouldn't be competitive at the at that level against those guys. Basically without enhancing. And so, you know, there's definitely pressure there. And then previously in my career, I guess there's always been sort of some pressure, but I think particularly I think more so when I started trying to win in sort of enhanced federations. I guess it's always something that sort of crosses your mind. But I guess like previously it wasn't something, I mean, I was so close to the weight cap anyway, only a couple of kilograms under, that it's just like, I don't know, if I went down that route, then I probably wouldn't be light enough to make weight in classic anyway, which would sort of defeat the purpose of it, because it's kind of just like, well, I'm not really, you know, once classic came in, I wasn't really interested in going back to just bodybuilding, and it doesn't really align with my view of like what I like about the sport kind of thing. So then it'd just be kind of no point.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Fair enough. So still pondering on decisions and outcomes.
Still pondering on decisions. I haven't really made a final decision, but there's just lots of other stuff that I'm doing in my life at the moment that I don't have as much desire and passion towards the sport that I did maybe, I think, probably 5-6 years ago. I feel like the most fire that I had was probably between 2014 and 2018. I think it was just like when I was sort of still in sort of my mid to late 20s, and I was just like, that was like the most important thing. But sort of getting older and then sort of looking at, okay, well, what am I going to do for the next, 50 years of my life or whatever? And, thinking about my future a bit more, and sort of like, those things that we talked about before, is just like, when you sacrifice the rest of your life to pursue one particular goal, I think like, I don't know, that's not as enticing anymore. I think like when I was a bit younger, it's just like, yeah, kind of thing. But now it's sort of just like, okay, I just want to get my life in check. I want to, just what does a fulfilling life look like to me? And then sort of, this is something I've really been sort of thinking about the last couple of years. And one of the reasons that I went and started getting into the filmmaking, acting, that sort of stuff a lot more, and sort of pursuing those creative pursuits, because I was just like, I don't want to get like old and never have done this kind of thing. But then also just like, what does my work and business life look like, and community and relationships and all that sort of stuff. And sort of like bodybuilding has sort of taken a little bit more of a back seat, but I'm still sort of training regularly and intensely enough that it's just like I'm still within sort of striking distance of a competition. So it's just like, okay,
it's there.
It's there. Yeah. So it's just like I'm not drifting too far away, that it's just like, okay, cool. At any given point, I could be pretty competitive within, like a 6-month time frame sort of thing. And just sort of staying there for now, but sort of not putting a lot of pressure to sort of decide like anything like immediately. Yeah.
Which makes sense. Like you said, you've got to like figure out what else is there, because I think, like you said, when you're young, you can get really tunnel visioned and make some choices where you're like, maybe if I had more hindsight and life experience, maybe I would have chosen something different, which kind of leads me to, before we, wrap up with some rapid fire questions, I wanted to ask, what's on the cards for the future for you, whether that is comp prep, which you've kind of addressed, or, you mentioned filmmaking before, and are you super creative? What's like on the, horizon for you now? Where is your attention? What are you doing? What are you into? That sort of stuff.
Yeah. So I guess, I map out a lot of my goals in terms of like different areas of my life. So I've got like, my work and my business and that sort of thing. So one thing I do want to do is like more over the next year is like more media content, like putting more of this sort of stuff out there, like, being involved in like podcasts, and then sort of putting more of my own content online, and sort of building like my coaching business, and continuing to help people, and also like the posing stuff as well. And yeah, just putting a little bit more focus on that. And then in terms of like personal goals and that sort of thing, like I just last year I made like a couple of short films, and just getting them through like the film festival circuits and stuff like that. So I've had one film. It's actually a comedy about a bunch of bodybuilders. And cool. Yeah, it's actually displaying, it's got into SIDFest, International Film Festival down in Sydney. So that's going to be screening at, I think at Olympic Park in like a couple of weeks. So I'm going to go down for that, and then, hopefully get that film into a bunch of other places, and sort of, I've made like another little drama film, and so trying to basically put that out there as well. And just like, I just love being creative, telling stories and stuff like that. So I always want that to be sort of, a part of my life. Whether it becomes a career or not is sort of maybe less important, but I feel like there's just such an important part of me that I have to keep always doing stuff like that, whether it's something I've made or whether I'm, collaborating with someone else's vision and sort of helping them achieve that. That's always really good too. So that's another area I think over the next couple of years, and I'm going to be doing. And then, I think there's a bunch of other stuff on the cards as well. In terms of like the fitness stuff. Yeah. Again, like I think at some point I probably will do at least one more show, whether it's like an IFBB show or whether I go back and, because I'm still natural, I guess it just depends. Am I going to go down that way, or am I going to, go back and do like another natural show or something? But I feel like it's something that it's just like I'm at the back end of my competitive career now, but I don't feel like I'm fully finished yet. I feel like I just want to do maybe one more. And so sort of building up my physique, because I feel like you have like an expiry on it as well. You don't really, you can compete right up until you're 80, but like
there is a point where you start to maybe go backwards.
Yeah, at that top level. And I feel like sort of mid to late 30s is where most people would probably peak if they've been sort of doing it. Give or take. There's some people who've done really well into their 40s and some people who peak early, like in their 20s. But I feel like that sort of 30 to 40 bracket is sort of where you sort of peak is at, particularly like naturally. But
how old are you now?
Just turned 37 not that long ago. So,
so you're in that sweet spot.
Yeah. And I feel like, I'm in that sweet spot now. I've probably got a couple more years before it's like I start going, too far backwards. So I feel like, I'm still in a spot where I can do this at a really high level. And so, I might do that one more time as well.
Yeah, which makes sense. One for the road, but like you said, you never know. Never say never. And it's great that you've got those other, artistic endeavors as well. And congrats on the film. That's awesome, man. I'd love to see that. Sounds great.
Oh, cool.
Actually, especially obviously with the bodybuilding and then sort of tying it into like a film or something that's like a bit comedic, etc. Which would be great. I'd like to wrap up with just some more fun questions, just lighthearted, but they're interesting. People like to know about these things, and I think they're a bit fun before the final question. And so one of the first things is, what's like your ultimate favorite meal? Like anything that you really love food-wise? Bodybuilders generally love food, but is there any, like, do you have a go-to? Might be a home-cooked meal, might be a takeout meal.
Damn, I don't know. I love variety. That's my thing. Like maybe a buffet. Buffet for sure. It's weird. I kind of avoid buffets though, because
I just stop.
I can't stop. But if I had to pick one, maybe cheesecake. I love cheesecakes.
Oh yeah, man. Just like a New York baked fucking
like baked cheesecake with like maybe a side of whipped cream and. Yeah.
Now you're talking. Yeah. That's gains right there.
Yeah.
And what about if you could choose a superpower, what would it be and why? And you feel free to make one up. It's all part of the fun.
Superpower. Yeah, I don't know. It's not a question I've thought about a whole lot. Maybe a superpower to... I think I might have even spoken. Yeah, I think I was talking about someone the other day. Like, we were talking about things like being able to fly or being able to teleport or something. I think one that's maybe a bit more realistic is like having complete control over all your emotions. Just being able, I feel like that would be like a superpower.
That fucking would be a superpower, especially in certain points in time. That's for sure. It's an interesting one. It's kind of, these questions are thought provoking. Although they're meant to be rapid fire, they can literally unleash a whole,
go down into that
conversation, especially with a few of them. And my last question, which is a little bit more serious in nature, which is, can you identify a fear that you've had in life? And I know you've touched on a few, or maybe a fear that you still currently have, and either how you overcome that or what you're doing to overcome this said fear. And if you have overcome it, what have you learned from it?
Well, I guess one of the things that I've overcome, well, I haven't fully overcome it yet, but I've sort of desensitized myself a little bit. So I had a pretty decent fear of heights. And so I went skydiving when I was like 21, and then I never went again, but I did enjoy it.
Yeah.
But like, I thought like that was something that I'll just push myself through it and kind of do it. But then, I think it was like a few years later, we had like this, staff like get together kind of day, and they were doing like an indoor rock climbing course and stuff like that. And I just pretended I was sick, so I didn't have to go to it. So no one would see how I wouldn't get so embarrassed about like getting halfway up the wall and just being frozen and stuck and not being able to get down, sort of thing. And so I sort of got through that by going back to like these indoor rock climbing places and sort of just almost like gradual exposure therapy. And so I would sort of slowly climb up like the purple route and frustrate my mate, like, oh my God, you're taking so long. I'm just like holding myself at the top and breathing and kind of just like, yep, I'm not going to die.
Yeah,
I'm just like,
this
yeah.
is fine.
And then just kind of just let go and feel the harness take the weight, and then looking down. It wasn't like crazy. It was like maybe 8 meters.
Yeah, but
so
still.
it's like enough that it's like you would get pretty fucked up if you fell off that. But like it was like, yeah, and the harness slowly lowers you down. And I would do that like 5 or 6 times. And eventually it actually kind of worked. Like eventually it's just like you get so desensitized to it to the point where you almost get kind of bored of it. And it's just like, oh, well, now I'm ready to climb the blue routes and then the red routes and then the gray ones where you actually have to leap off the wall and nothing's suspending you kind of thing. And you grab onto another piece of thing on the wall. And I was like, within, probably 4 or 5 months, I got to that point.
That's awesome.
And I was like, yeah, but I mean, it's still kind of there. Like if I walk out onto
like a
high rise or something like that, it's kind of just like I feel a bit weird, and it's kind of just like, so I'm not at the point where I'm just like completely over it, but I'm at the point where it's just like it's less debilitating.
Well, to be fair, that's probably a built-in mechanism not to die, which we all have. People say I got fear of heights. I'm like, I think we all kind of do, because that's kind of the body saying, if you go over there, you're probably fucking not gonna make it. So
Yeah.
it's that whole kind of like, how much can you desensitize from that internal like drive that is just inbuilt on us for years. But it makes sense, man. And I think, for people that want to get over it, like you said, you're better to do what you've done and actually at least go, well, you know what, if it's really high, let me kind of desensitize it a little bit. And it's amazing what you can learn and take from that experience and then apply it to other things as well. So I appreciate you sharing, man, and I appreciate your time today. It's been a great chat. It's been super curious, fascinating. I've been wanting to do this for a long time because you're someone that I look up to, especially in the physique sports, but also as well, like as a physique role model, because again, you have other interesting, other interests, other elements. And I think that's really important because a lot of the time, physique athletes can kind of just be painted like, oh, you're just a one-dimensional character, which is not the case. So I appreciate you sharing. But for people who maybe want to connect, follow along, like, check out your films, or like you said, check out this media that you're going to be putting out there, where's the best places for people to find you?
Yeah, I would say the best places for people to find me probably Instagram. So just my name, Pete Hartwig, and also on my website, petehartwig.com or petehartwig.com.au.
Awesome. And we'll put the links in the descriptions as always. Thanks again, Pete, for sharing. Really appreciate it. For everyone listening and watching, as always, we don't put any ads on here. So if you like this conversation, please share it, like it, comment. If you've got any questions for me or Pete, put them in the comments below. Check out his stuff as well. And until the next episode, as always, stay fearless.
For those of you who are confused, frustrated, and sick and tired of not seeing the results that you want or deserve, make sure that you click the apply for coaching button in the description below and line up a completely free consultation with myself where we can discover if it's a good fit as client and coach and take your health and physique to the next level once and for all.